Hi, welcome. So I'm Steve, and this is Bountium. Bountium is a platform for autonomous commerce in which one can deploy a smart contract to represent their business, release products, and then connect those products to incentivizer markets, which can then incentivize the completion of the product supply chain. So I'll explain via example. This is what you see as a landing page, obviously very sparse, going to improve on that. Right now it's just a beta. But you have a couple options. So you'll need MetaMask. I have MetaMask, luckily. And if you want to use one of the examples, which I'll point out in a second, you have to set it to the Robson test network. So I say that a good place to start is creating our own business. So we first allow localhost to check out our address. Good privacy feature there. So let's create a new business. If we already had one, we could input the address there. But for now, let's create one. How about Steve's Great Biz? And I'm going to give myself 100% of equity, which means that I'm going to allocate one share out of one total shares for myself. If I wanted to make it out of 100, that'll work fine too. And if I wanted to leave some unallocated, I could do 100 out of 200 or however much I wanted. So for now, 1-for-1 seems to do the job. Let's deploy our business. All right, submit that. Our business's contract's being deployed to the blockchain. Great, so now we'll wait for that to confirm. I'll edit this part out. Perfect. So our business has been deployed to this address here. Going to copy that quickly. Okay. So now we're taken to a dashboard automatically. If we wanted to go directly to a link that would allow us to see the same dashboard, you can just put it in the address bar, or we could go back to that initial input field and input this address. So we can do some things. We can check out our catalog. There's a big old button to release a new product if we wanted to. We'll do that in a second. For now, let's check out the organization. So just like we meant to set, we have one share out of one total shares, and we can see the owner's address on Etherscan. So we have a couple options. We could transfer my shares. I could transfer my one share to a new address if I wanted to. We could give some unallocated shares if there were any. Obviously, there aren't. We could also create new shares. So if we wanted to dilute everyone's stake, we could create one share and give it to some address, which could include myself if I so chose. And lastly, we can assign some roles. So I'm the only owner, so obviously I have all of these permissions, which can include some organization affecting decisions as well as some catalog affecting decisions, and this board membership, which currently doesn't do anything, but if someone wanted to extend the contract and give certain roles to board members, they could. So you follow this code, and you'll be able to assign other owners similar permissions. By default, a new owner doesn't have any permissions, so you'll have to add one or more of these if you want to give them those permissions. So we also can see that the organization has a balance of 0, and we can choose to fund the organization if they need funding for some reason. And lastly, we can also call for a dividend, which would give out a certain number of Y per share. I'm not going to do that right now because I'm the only owner, obviously, but that's how you claim profit out of the organization. So without further ado, let's release a product. We're going to sell nice emails to people. We're going to write them a nice email for a fee, and we're going to charge 100 Wei for it. So let's describe this product and include some instructions as well for the potential purchasers. So a heartwarming email personalized to your name. Please leave your email and name in the input. All right, and we can get a logo. Let's go find a niceness image somewhere. All right, how about this one? Copy image location. Perfect. So we can put the link to our product's image. Now, if this was like a custom-made product, we could put a picture that we took of the product right there. You can also, I don't know if you noticed, but it integrates with IPFS as well to make it completely decentralized if you so choose. And lastly, we're going to need an incentivizer for the supply chain of this product. Now, obviously in practice, writing nice emails doesn't require a supply chain. But for the sake of this example, let's go grab a address of one of our incentivizers we set up. So I'll explain more about what an incentivizer is. Essentially, when you have a product, right, you have one or more steps in its supply chain, and you need to be able to pay every supplier in that supply chain who completes a step. It would be ideal to not only pay them automatically when they complete the step, but actually to evaluate their completion and make sure it's up to snuff. So that's the innovation Bountium brings. We created a smart contract earlier at this address that is connected to what's called an assessor, which is defined simply as an interface initially So this incentivizer contract takes in something that assesses a supply step, and once that assessor says this step was completed properly for a certain request made, then that supplier who completed it, as credited by the assessor, can claim their payment. So we're going to pay them 10Y, have a nice profit margin of 90Y per order, and we're going to add that step to our supply chain. Now, we could also add more. I think this gets the example across pretty well, though. And we're also going to list it immediately, meaning that customers will be able to order it. So let's deploy this product. And this happens in 2 transactions. The first one is that this initial product with its name and price is sent to the autonomous business contract, and then the rest of these details, including the description, the image, and the supply chain steps and the listing, are all sent in a batch as a second transaction. That's because we need to establish what the product is before we start adding details. So I'm going to edit this wait out, but we're going to wait for the blockchain to confirm that. Perfect. So the product's been released, and now we're going to send all the details like the description, the image, the supply chain steps, and the listing status. So those are getting confirmed now. I'm going to wait for all of them to go through unless they already have. Let me check. Once that thing clears, get out of here. Okay. Perfect. So our product is now finalized. Let's check it out. Great. We have its picture, we have its name, its price, no orders received, obviously. It's for sale. It has a description. And lastly, we have a step in the supply chain that goes out to an incentivizer. Great. So if we wanted to modify anything, so we wanted to update the description, change it, we could do that here. We won't right now. So let's see what it's like for a customer. Let's view my store and see what it looks like. This is the auto-generated storefront. That's the default storefront generated by my front end for every single business. Here we can see that if we want to send a link to our customers, we can follow it. So let's go from the customer's perspective now. This is what they see. They have a way to check the status of their orders, which I'll explain in a second. And they can see products that have been listed as available. Obviously, this is the only one. So let's say that I want a nice email. This is my email. Please feel free to reach out to me. So we put my email, my name, and we order. Perfect. So we'll wait for the blockchain to confirm that. Perfect. So our order has been confirmed for a product with ID 0 and an order ID of 0. So we should save these if we want to check later in that little checker I pointed out. Now, evidently, a non-tech savvy customer may be confused by these terms. So we're going to switch to something a lot more human readable. But for now, this should do the job. So we say, okay, 0 and 0, got that. So if we wanted to check it right now, obviously this is going to be incomplete. No one's even had the chance to see what's going on. So 0 out of 1 steps have been completed in the supply chain of my order that I just made. So let's go back to the business. By the way, this actually detects if you're an owner of the business when you try to do this little direct link. So I just was able to do that since I didn't switch accounts. But if I was in a different account, it would actually, yeah, let's show that. Let me switch to this guy here. And I'm not registered as an owner. So let's go back because I want to be an owner. Great. So now we see that one order has been received. That's fantastic. Let's see what the customer data is. All right. We have his email. We have his name. We can complete this order. So let's see, now play the role of supplier. So if a supplier wanted to fulfill the request on that order, they'd go to the incentivizer market for it, which I believe is this one, and they would look up the bounty ID. Now, so every request that an autonomous business generates when it receives orders has a numerical ID. Obviously, unless a supplier was working directly with the business owner, they wouldn't know the bounty IDs. So for existing business relationships, this system works great, but our goal is to democratize supply chains, right? Is to allow for anyone to complete anyone's bounty request, any supplier to complete any business owner's bounty request without necessarily even needing to meet them ever. I think that would be super exciting. So we're going to use a registrar down the road to register incentivizer markets and actually show not only markets by theme, but also markets like incomplete bounty requests made in markets as a feed for suppliers. So for now, though, since it's a beta, this will work fine. We'll look up a bounty by ID and see that these are the relevant customer data. Perfect. I'm just kidding. That's not the right bounty ID. There we go. So got cut off on the front end. I'll fix that later. But for now, we see that there's an award of 10Y available if I complete this. and it has not been completed yet, so let's submit a response. Now, the incentivizer I set up here, I mentioned that incentivizers, right? They receive bounties for bounty requests and are linked to an assessor for that same request. And once the assessor is satisfied with the response it's received, once the assessor is satisfied, the person who completed it can receive their award. Now, this incentivizer I set up is always satisfied with any response because it's an example. But some ways that it could be evaluated could be between a business owner and a supplier, so the business owner could manually approve a response. It could include incentive balancing, where maybe we have a reputation oriented system where business owners should approve good responses, and if they don't, they get penalized in some manner. And that way you can make sure that if a supplier does his job right, he gets paid, or at least the business owner is incentivized to make sure he gets paid. We can then move on to more complicated systems as those first initial ones are proven out, such as including third parties that vote on the quality of a response. And most excitingly, we can actually automate incentivizers by using tools such as computer vision. One example could be, or not necessarily, I guess more broadly, I mean that we could have assessors that use data analytics to evaluate the quality of a response. So one example could be if you had a delivery incentivizer, let's say. You could have some way to track the movement of the product, and once the product is within the location of the customer as specified by their physical address they inputted, we could evaluate that response as complete, and we could even then go a step further and add in maybe more complicated metrics that could go against GPS spoofing. A more apt example could possibly be computer vision that evaluates the physical production of a product, make sure it's the right color, the right metrics, and so on. So there's a lot of exciting things we can do, but I'm not creative enough to think of every possible incentivizer use case. Bountium has been built to be flexible and work with all kinds of possible incentivizers so they can become infinitely complex. So this is why I'm promoting this platform and open sourcing it and trying to garner developer interest, because I want to see all these kinds of incentivizers come from the community rather than just from myself. Obviously, I'll be working to make some really great ones to bootstrap this process, but I'd really like to see your guys' input. So for now, like I said, this will accept any response. So let's just say completed. I did it. Pay me. We'll submit that response, and now we'll wait for the blockchain to confirm that. Our response is on its way. We'll come back and look it up later to see if it was marked as completed. So I'm going to... Perfect. So that transaction was confirmed. Let's refresh the page for this incentivizer. Just going to use the direct link to save some time. And let's look up that bounty with ID 1. Actually, let's do a little hard refresh. I believe it cached it incorrectly. Perfect. So this has been marked as completed by my address. That's great. So let's pay out. Submit. Payment request is on its way, and we'll watch my wallet. All right. Wait for the blockchain to confirm that. Perfect. So that was confirmed, and now let's refresh this page and see what the status of that is. So the bounty is gone. That means I've received it. If you want to go on Etherscan, check this address, check the internal transactions, you'll see that it paid me 10Y. So that's perfect. Now, one last step. Let's go back to shopping. Let's see. Excuse me, lost the address of the business there, so I'll go back. All right, so let's go back to the storefront for this business we just set up. Do a hard refresh to double check to make sure we're not caching anything incorrectly. So we're going to look for product 0 and order 0 and see what the status is. 1 out of 1 steps have been completed, so that's great. And we should know that the product has arrived for me. So that's Bountium. Essentially, you're able to deploy a business as a smart contract, release products, and link them to smart contracts that manage its supply chain. And this should, with clever smart contracts to make sure that suppliers are completing their steps properly, this should automate the business management process significantly. This should allow for businesses to, in fact, democratize their entire supply chain and create a much cheaper supply chain over time for these businesses as people actually compete in order to complete requests for them. So I'm very excited about it. I'd love to hear your ideas for clever assessors that we can set up as smart contracts. Feedback about the front end. Obviously, there's a ton of work to do there. This was just enough to get the idea across. And yeah, I'm just very excited about this all. So my inbox is always open. Steve Flanagan at protonmail.com. I'm Steve Flanagan _ on Twitter. So feel free to reach out to me on either one, and I'd love to get the conversation started. Thank you so much.